Welcome back, America. We are here with our friend Jonathan Turley, who you know well, law professor, but he is more than that. He is really a scholar, he's a thinker, he is a philosopher. I tell you, when he writes a book, I get excited. This is a real tour de force. Rage and the Republic, the unfinished story of the American Revolution. You know, Jonathan, you're not just a professor. You're a scholar, thinker, a philosopher. You write beautifully. You represent a tremendous amount of historical context for what you say. I want to encourage everybody to go to Amazon.com and grab this book. You're about to get a little taste of it and see why. First of all, why the title, Rage and the Republic?
Thank you very much, Mark. The book really is an effort to look at more of the elements that came together, those unique elements of personality and events that produce the world's most stable and successful democracy. Part of that was rage, for this is a country, like many countries, that was born in revolution. And the test that faced the founders was that it's easy to start a revolution, it's not so easy to end one. The test is to create a republic out of a revolution, which they succeeded in doing. The book looks at two revolutions at first. That is, that US Revolution and, of course, the French Revolution. One became a successful democracy, the other became a bloodletting. And it looks at why. But why the American Republic became such a success. The second half of the book looks at whether that unique republic can survive in the 21st century. It's one of the tests that we are facing. But at the end of the day, what this is about is the human condition. That is, revolutions are an odd thing. Our revolution, in many ways, is referenced by two figures I talk about a lot deal in the book, Thomas Paine and James Madison. Paine was the righteous rage. They gave a voice to that revolution. There's James Madison, who was the pious logic. He tried to show how you had to restrain impulse to preserve a republic and the liberties for everyone.
Mark, you do such a beautiful job of laying this out. These are two great men. You're right, they're very different personalities, how they approach things, and I like the way you explained the French Revolution really was quite different than the American Revolution, and Paine in many ways was quite different than Madison. Paine really was the man for the revolution. He was the man for the revolution, but not for the Constitution. Isn't that about right?
What's astonishing about Thomas Paine, it talks about a lot about his life. He's one of two figures that played a significant role in both revolutions, but the other being Lafayette. Paine was not an advocate of those precautions and limitations that Madison insisted on having. He went to France and he argued for more direct democracy. It came close to killing him. He came within 24 hours of being guillotined. And so the question the book raises is, what did we learn from those two revolutions that can help us in the 21st century? Paine is an amazing figure. You keep in mind, 2 years before the Declaration of Independence, and he washed up on our shores. He was a human Iraq. He failed in everything in his life. He'd been fired from every job and he ever had. His marriages collapsed. He appeared before someone in London as a penniless, notorious drunkard, according to many. Someone saw something in Paine, and that was Benjamin Franklin. But he saw him in London and sent him to the United States. Within 2 years of his landing, he became the penman of the revolution. Even John Adams, who had a lot of criticism of Paine, laid it to his wife how he was described in his first meeting, that Paine was a gentleman with genius in his eyes. And he was. He knew what it took to bring a nation to revolution, but it was a Madison who knew how to take a revolution and turn it into a republic.
Mark, you talk in the book about basically democracy and mob prevents. Very relevant today. And again, they kind of go back to the French and the American Revolution. What do you mean by that, and how do you explain that in the book?
The framers were most concerned about democratic despotism. They did not want a pure democracy. Everyone would talk about the Athenian democracy, but that was a failure. It resulted in tyranny, and they did not want to replicate what happened in Athens and so many countries, because there was a French figure who was critical to the revolution after the terror remarked, "Revolution is like Saturn, it devours its own." And that is very true. In the French Revolution, the so-called people-like were ultimately guillotined themselves, where the revolution devoured them as it devoured others. And so the real test for Madison and others to avoid what's called democratic despotism, they did that by dividing the powers, having checks on the powers, having very strong federalism principles in our system. All of that worked to create this amazing new republic. One thing I try to capture in the book is how fascinated people in Europe were with us, but we were considered almost a new species. A Frenchman asked, "What is then the American?" They treated us as if we had come fully formed as a new type of human being. Grab the book.